And welcome to the InfoTech podcast, the podcast that discusses the intersection of business and technology. I'm your host, Jimmy Huber. And if you're a longtime listener, you know that sometimes I tend to punch above my weight when I get guests on this podcast. And today is no exception to that. My guest today is Richard Titus with Kimono. Now,
Oh,
some of you might know Richard from his past life, so I'm going to give him the floor here to tell a little bit about his background and kind of how he got to start Kimono, but we really appreciate your time and welcome to the show, Titus.
thanks, Jimmy. Yeah. When people ask me to briefly describe my career, I never know what to say. So I started as a young man growing up I was actually born near Disneyland. And I grew up in Southern California in surf culture and the punk music scene and metal music scene and surfing. But also my dad was officially a defense contractor, but probably worked in the clandestine services. And we had an internet connection and computers way before most people knew what those things were. This is in the 70s, right? And so computers were my playground. And because I was a musical, the marriage of MIDI, which is a musical instrument digital interface, and computers, like, man, I just spent hours and hours and hours either hacking in systems connected to the internet, which is not a good thing, or writing sequencers and synthesizers to make music. And that
That's
teed
cool.
me up very nicely and I'm skipping a bunch of parts. I spent a bunch of time in the music business. I was signed as an artist. I did a brief tour. I actually toured the world with the Beach Boys as a sound engineer and as a front of house and roadie, and then mixed their
I'm
very
sorry, did you
last
say you
record.
you you were
I
the
did.
sound guy for the Beach Boys?
Yeah, not only that, Keith Wexler and I recorded what became their very last major recording album called Summer in Paradise, which was
No way.
recorded the first album that I know of recorded on Pro Tools. So we were like featured in magazines. It was a big deal.
Oh, wow, that's
And
cool.
an interesting side note, at that time, many reporters and magazines were like, Titus and Wexler ruined music because now you just push a button, the album records itself. And I thought to myself, this was beta software. It barely worked. It crashed all the
Yeah,
time. Like, it was way harder to do this the way we did it if we just put a tape machine and pressed record. But
hilarious.
that intersection of tech and music, or, tech, art, and the future is sort of where I've lived most of my life.
Got it. Yeah, so I didn't we talked before this and I did not know any of that.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
learning today along with the audience. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're a pretty big deal. I've had people on here that go back into the 80s, but not the 70s doing MIDI before computers were even a thing in
I
mainstream.
was a
So
kid.
that's a step
Yeah.
beyond.
I was a kid. I started my first startup, if you'll call it that, which was a BBS in Orange County when I was 12 years old, stringing phone lines to my neighbors' houses to steal fax lines so I could have more dial-in. If you know what a BBS is, sort of pre-AOL, people would dial into my computer, and my mom didn't know anything about computers, but she knew a lot about 12-year-old boys. So she's like, you could do anything you want, but no porn. So when you
Right.
logged in my BBS, it said, welcome to the 818, no porn in like giant font. Now, the thing is, as a kid, I didn't know that 90% of the world's pornography at that time was made in the area code of the 818. So everyone thought I was like this super snarky hacker, but I didn't actually
Hilarious.
know that. It was just my mom said I had
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah. Well,
But what
good
that
on
meant
mom.
well,
Yeah.
what that meant is that kids whose parents, and this is, by the way, they had to mail me coins or a check in an envelope to join the BBS. There's no e-commerce yet, right? That parents were like, okay, no porn, like, I'll pay for this. And so they would send their, $12 or $20 a month in check form, which I would deposit in a bank account my cousin and I set up in our business name. And I made a not insignificant amount of money doing this. My major expertise was removing the encryption from software so people could evaluate it for purchase.
Oh, wow. Doesn't
And
Steve Jobs have a parallel story to this?
it's very
He
funny. Like,
he
I
had
didn't
a
know that till
dialer?
very recently. Someone at a
Okay.
conference, I met him once. That comes up later in the story, but I met him once, and I loved him and it terrified me, right? Like, and then this person said, you guys have a lot more in common, like a terrifying, not, I don't want to compare myself to Steve Jobs, but like,
Sure,
like
sure.
I sort of, having brushed by him in the universe of life, I felt a kindred spirit and also like a deep fear of like, wow, that man, he's different than the rest of them. Right. And
Yeah.
yeah,
100%.
I don't know if anyone
Yeah.
feels that about me, but if they do, look, I'm really gentle and nice. I'm not dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, to be a wild success, you have to be different, right? You're definitely status quo, but then your personality comes into play, and I think he had quite the personality of, so both those sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's fascinating. So bring us then from those days up until now. I mean, I know you've
So,
had you don't have to go into everything, but
yeah, yeah.
there's still quite a big gap there.
I'll do some like just a little sketching. So I spent some time in the music business, and I've talked a bit about being sober, so I'm very transparent about it. I've been sober from drugs and alcohol for 34 years this July 5th,
Wow, good
so
for
that's
you.
a really big deal. But that moment of choosing life over death kind of gave me a right turn in life because up till then I'd been in the music business. I was moderately successful. I consumed most of my money in the form of drugs and alcohol, but at least I had a sort of reciprocal link on my own. And when I got sober, I couldn't do the music thing anymore because in those days, sobriety was not supported by the industry. And so I had one fungible skill that was not related to drugs and alcohol, and that was computers. And so I started building, at first, I started putting people's computers on the internet. This is like a very interesting time where the browser had just sort of been launched by Mark Andreessen at University of Illinois. And so I got paid sometimes in records, sometimes in cash, sometimes in other things. But like people would pay me to come into their office and circumvent their IT to put their computer on the internet so they could see what this whole thing was. And I actually
You
made
were a
just
paid hacker.
yeah, that's how I started to make money, and I eventually
Yeah.
realized, like, this web thing was kind of a big deal, so I started a company, and I'm skipping some parts. I spent some time in movies and video games. You can Google me and find that stuff. But I started spending time working with a couple guys I'd met through the video game space, building websites. We built a website for a company called Centropolis. A guy named Dean Devlin, who's been part of my career for a long time. He's a great guy. He made, at that time, Stargate, and he was working on a film called Independence Day, and his visual effects producer, who later became my wife, and I just started dating. We then built NASA's website. Yes, that's right. And
What?
that was sort of a moment, getting a government contract when you're like 22 to do something that important kind of changed our vector. And before, 2 years later, we'd sold the company to Omnicom in a bidding war. We were rolled up in a company called Razorfish. That company went public. On paper, for a brief period of time, I was very wealthy. The dot-com crash happened. I suddenly was less wealthy, but still had a little bit of money. I then started, a couple years later, I bought an agency out of bankruptcy. So a friend of mine had a company, was in some financial trouble. So I bought half the company out from the bank, and we turned it around and we renamed it Schematic, and we built that up. We sold that a few years later to WPP. And then the time of doing that transaction with WPP, my first wife and I, Tavin, who I mentioned before, we started making movies. We made about 20 film and television shows, a few really famous films like Who Killed the Electric Car, and then lots and lots of bad sci-fi films that made a lot of money. And we moved to Romania for 3 years during that time to make movies. While we still was running Schematic, remotely as a board member. And two things happened at the same time. Our film company collapsed there was a financial crisis where the pound, the euro, and the dollar all went crazy. George Soros probably caused it. And we lost. I went from living in Romania, being very rich, making movies, trying to, like retire, get rich guy, rich.comer, to we call it bankrupt in Bucharest. Like we were bankrupt. Like we literally like woke up in Romania with my mother-in-law, with our kids, and like, yeah, I need a job. Like, and
Wow.
so we moved to London, like kind of because it was the fastest, cheapest place to find work. The movies were sort of dead. We rented a house. I got a job. A guy named Eric Huggers, who was an old client of mine from Microsoft, had just joined the BBC as like the chief information officer. His title was group controller. And he hired me first as a contractor, then as an employee. And he was basically like, hey, you just got to turn this place around, help me fix this. And so he gave me 3 tasks on day one. Task one was, hey, can you fix the website? It's a hot mess. There's this kid named Matthew Postgate, and he's got this mobile idea. I think it's crazy, but can you manage him? I think there's something there. And I know you a lot about video. I knew a lot about video systems because Schematic was the world leader in VOD UI on cable systems and airplanes and cars. And so the company I'd founded was very big in that space. And he's like, I know you a lot about VOD. I want to put BBC television on the internet, but that was about as long as the brief got at that time. It was like, could you fix this? There's some guys on the 3rd floor. They got some like cool tech. The cool tech wasn't really cool teching, but I was like, hey, BBC is kind of interesting. We own all the rights. So unlike every other client I've had, I don't have any rights issues. We own it all. So I could put every piece of BBC content on the internet today. Like no one can stop me. And so
That's interesting.
there were a few projects milling around the BBC, and there was a guy named Anthony Rose. There's actually a podcast dropping right after yours, where we talk about this, where we basically, we hired Anthony and like 6 other all people who went on to do crazy, amazing things. And we built the first streaming service before Hulu, before anything else, called BBC iPlayer. And when we launched it on Christmas Day, it changed the world. Like suddenly you could watch the last 7 days of television for free on streaming services. We even had a mobile client, which is bonkers. When I think about it today, like the fact that we had a mobile client then, this is WAP, right? There's no mobile browser. There's no iPhone yet. Like this was crazy. And
So
those
this
three
was like
years are,
late 90s? Or
yeah, I
what are
have
we
to look it
talking?
up. I'm just calculating.
Yeah.
We'll come to that later. I'm very
Okay.
neurodiverse, so I can't tell you names and dates, like, or street numbers, or I
No,
can't
that's all
really
good.
add.
I'm just trying to place this in
Yeah,
timeline
so
here.
think about
That's
this.
wild.
Jason Kilar from Hulu came to visit and see what we were doing and copied a shit ton of our technical architecture. And we didn't care because BBC could only operate in Britain. Like we didn't have the rights
Oh, I
outside the
see.
UK.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we were like, yeah, sure, copy us.
So
So
we're 11 minutes into this, and I think I have
yeah,
more content than all my other episodes combined.
you
But
can chop it up.
to a nutshell, yeah. So you've had a lot of easy come, easy go. Maybe like you've had
I
peaks
I've had I've
valleys,
been rich, I've been poor. Rich is better, but yeah, I've experienced both several times.
and you came out the other side. You figured out that the music industry, unless you're not sober, there's not much there. You pivoted
Well,
into tech. You
yeah.
went to the BBC because you could do things there that you you couldn't other places. So
And by
I'm
the way,
starting to
and I
piece
was
this
bankrupt,
together.
so I needed a job. That's a really important
And
thing.
you're bankrupt,
Yeah,
yeah, so out of
if I
necessity.
wasn't bankrupt, I wouldn't take that job. It's a very funny thing that I think back on that many times. Like desperation makes you make the right choice when all
Sure.
other options are not available.
Yeah, I think that scales all the way down to small business
I
and
agree,
pretty much, yeah,
1000%.
when you've got pressure that's gonna make it. So I would say though, most people in your that have your experience would spiral. I think that would be more of the tendency. Especially with the mental health issues of today, I think a lot of people couldn't handle that. Not
Yeah,
only did you handle it, but it seems like you've come out on the other side, and now you're promoting a new company, a new startup
yeah,
after all that. So, I wanna talk about we're supposed to talk about Kimono here. That's the point of this
yeah,
episode with you.
yeah.
But I want to get into like how did that happen? What brought you out of that into a good place? Because I don't think that's pretty common. I mean, I think it's very rare.
So look, the best of times and the worst of times I've experienced a lot. 3 years ago, I had a traumatic brain injury, and that ties directly into the Kimono story. Trust me, which is I was attacked by two men in the streets of San Francisco. It was covered on national news. They beat me almost to death, and I had this
Oh
cracked
my word!
skull. And I came to LA because it was close. I'm in the middle of I'm actually just finished getting divorced from my second wife, and it was a very high conflict divorce. So I needed to be somewhere that my daughter could come visit me. At that time, I couldn't drive or fly, but I couldn't tell anyone I couldn't drive or fly because I would have lost custody. So I had to like pretend like everything was fine, and everything was most
Wow.
definitely not fine. And so as part of my recovery, my neurologist is like, hey, you need to do things to expand and retain your neuroplasticity. So I had this, and I'm not joking, a Dropbox folder of text files because I think sometimes minimum structure and I would just like free form write in them ideas, like business ideas. So like one was called blah, blah, blah. But the one that
Sure.
Kimono came from was called The Cleaner. And it was basically, I tried to buy Plaxo, if you remember that social network back in the day. It was basically a
Wow.
contact cleaning app. And I tried to buy it
Mhm.
with a private equity firm in the failed. But I was always passionate about this idea because I'm neurodiverse, so I can never remember people's phone numbers. So I always keep them in some sort of computing device. And so I started grinding away on all these documents. I eventually showed this text, literally the text file, to a guy named Ratiman Kaforji, who at the time was head of product at Yahoo. And he quit his job and we started the company. And then we went through a few technical leaders and iterated a few times before we got to where Kimono is today. And Kimono is very basically at its core premise, contacts, that's like, phone number, email, and context, like the knowledge around that graph, are the most used data type in the world. Every computing device held by a human, or even most of the ones that aren't, have some form of contacts on them, contacts and
Mhm.
context. And yet the systems for storing, retrieving, managing, they are stuck in a 20-year-old architecture that it's abandonware. It has not evolved in the slightest. And so anything you want to build on the service layer on top of this is a fail. And so the premise was basically start fixed contacts. If we can either do this tops down, we got to raise $50 million, or we do it bottoms up and we start with, consumers and direct to users, we call it, because they're really prosumers. Like, my mom's not going to pay me 10 or $30 a month, but like business users, people who are outbound will.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was like,
Sure.
fix the phone book. On your mobile device today, I guarantee you have between 5 and 15 contact databases, WhatsApp, Telegram, email, Gmail, iCloud, Microsoft. The only thing I know for sure is you don't know who you know. You don't know which ones are the same people. You can never figure out how to email someone when you need to reach them, and it's utterly broken. So we
Oh
decided
yeah.
to fix that. And with the rise of AI, I had some intuitions. And look, I am very technical and very smart, but I'm no engineer by any means. Like that's my head of AI makes fun of me. Like I am not a CTO and I'm not a programmer. I can do some wicked vibe coding and I did write HTML back in the day, a little JavaScript, but I'm not an engineer. But
Yeah.
I thought,
Same with Steve Jobs there too. I'm
yeah,
not trying to make a comparison, but there is a correlation there, and he did all right. But,
when
yeah,
when you plug an LLM in the early days, it was just one into contact data in a privacy first, secure, sovereign way. And you start to think about this. We had an aha moment, which is like, this is way bigger than cleaning up your contacts because all these agentic systems, whether it's Cowork, OpenClaw, Perplexity, but also other systems that are being built and architected today, they all share the same issue. There is no contact and no context layer between them that is centered on the user. So if I load all my contacts into ChatGPT, that's not only a violation of privacy law, it's also like it doesn't work
yeah,
because it
yeah.
doesn't know anything about them, right? It doesn't have the cross network device and system graph. And so we today support Microsoft, Google, Apple, Telegram, WhatsApp, iMessage,
LinkedIn, I think.
LinkedIn, of course, everyone
Yeah.
does that. We download and upload. I'm hoping we get Firehose access, but we don't have it today. Everything in a legal, privacy first, secure way. And that's really, really important because you're not going to give all that to someone who takes ownership of it. We don't train
Oh,
on
yeah,
your
it's
data.
critical info.
Yeah,
Sure.
we
Sure.
never share without your instruction, not just consent. We try and build replicability into every share. And that's the business, right? And so we right now today, if you go to go.getkimono.com, you can sign up for our beta. If you're nice and send me, some Bitcoin, I'll put you at the head of the list. There's currently 6,000 people in climbing waiting to get in the software. We've got about
No
a
kidding. Good for
thousand
you.
active users. We
Okay.
are aiming to be in the App Store this summer. We just shipped a new, we call it Homunculus. It's a new AI harness that wraps around Gemini, Claude, Nova, and 3 frontier models. And there's some
It's
really
called
cool.
homunculus?
Yeah, pretty cool, huh?
Hilarious.
Homunculus, actually. What's great about it
Homunculus.
is we're not trying to compete with OpenClaw or Claw Cowork, but we are doing a thing, which is like, we call it the rich man's OpenClaw. So it's like, if you're a go-to-market person who travels a lot, building a suite of services with an agentic system and built on context, and then supplying that as an MCP to people who have AI agents already. And then the third one is really starting to go deep on how to make this into the most important layer in the system. And that's really what we're focused on right now. Right. And so we're launched, we just had we're having our first customer conversations as we speak. It's a super, super exciting time. And if people in your audience, have large contact databases themselves as individuals, or we've had a lot of e-commerce companies come to us and ask for enrichment assistance. If you know what enrichment is, like you give me a phone number, an email, and a name, and I give you back a bunch of other data. So I have a bunch of e-commerce people see me do the demo, and they're like, "Can you give me all my users' Instagrams?" And I'm like, "Yeah, quarter a record." And they're like, "Done,"
Wow. That's
because
awesome.
the market is $1 to $2 for that same data. I can actually do it for far less, but right now I built in some margin so we can build some more
Well,
tooling.
sure, you gotta make some money. So let me
Otherwise,
back
it's a
up.
hobby.
Yeah, yeah. Let me back up a little bit because there's a ton of info in there. So I think I'm probably one of your target users. And I
Of
remember
course.
when you demoed it for me,
Yeah.
here is my perspective on this. So
Yeah.
I've dealt with contact problems my whole career. I probably have 3,000 just in my iPhone alone. There's duplicates everywhere. It's a complete mess. I use the search function to do anything, any functionality from anywhere. And you're right. If I have something in my phone and then I go to Outlook and I try to find the email, it's not there because they don't talk. It's a disaster. So, there's other companies that have tried to kind of mess with this. Like I was a dot card user back in the day, and you go to an event and where's your business card? Oh no, here's the dot card, But I had to manually put in all of my info and then hope he had it on the same side. Like it was very
A-
clunky, right?
And
So,
nothing recorded. This is really important.
oh
Kimono
yeah.
ID, which is our digital business card product, it knows where you met, the physical location. It captures from your
Well, that's
calendar. You're
cool.
at such and such conference. It meta tags. It says, "Hey, you met him at an AI conference. On the floor of the conference, he's probably an AI. We're going
Well,
to
so
tag him
you
as
have an
AI."
equivalent to that. I didn't know that
Yeah,
either. Oh,
yeah,
that's sweet.
yeah. If you
Yeah.
haven't seen it, we should definitely. I'll send you a screen grab you can throw into the podcast,
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
people can connect with me. And actually, that's the best way. The best way to try the product is that thing. I'll send that to you shortly.
Yeah. Well, I can vouch for it. I mean, I've gone through the demo a little bit and started syncing things in or whatnot, and the amount of intelligent data. So most of our users probably know what OpenClaw is and agentic AI, but basically to dilute that down, just in case you're not familiar, it's not only giving you prompts, but it is doing the work for you. So it's not just like a regular LLM where you have to really kind of know what you're doing. It's stepping in and gathering a lot of that data and doing the heavy lifting for you. So it makes it, I think, exponentially more valuable for people that want to just get in, get what they need, and get out. And the fact that you can do all that securely is huge because the one thing you don't want people to have, I mean, if you leave a job and go somewhere else, the only thing you care about is keeping your contacts. Like it's the one thing. And that's the thing that people don't get the security piece right. So is that pretty much it in a nutshell?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, basically, the idea is many, many things are broken today, right? And in when you go meet people at conferences, it was a thing we started thinking about, like, and to be clear, when we started building the enricher, it cost us like $2 a record. So we were like, don't enrich a lot of contacts. Like we've done a lot of heavy lifting to get it cheap. But one of the things we were talking about in that time is how do we trickle in contacts to tune the enricher while we're doing it? And so we just built this.
Yeah.
Frankly, it was for me, right? It was literally, we just built a little QR. I mean, we literally copied, like, all the digital business card things and we just with a little twist, right? And then people started signing up to our wait list from this thing. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. Like people would text me and be like, hey, how do I join? And so we like built a little thing where it gives you a little flow to sign up. And we have 400 people who got into the wait list from this mechanism, which is, that was not intentional, right? But then we
Wow, that's
started
cool.
realizing, like, you go to a conference, if you're like me, I'll meet a few hundred people in a 3-day period, especially if I'm speaking on a panel. I don't know who those people are. I don't know how important they are. It turns out
Yeah,
one of them's
there's
a
no
VC
way.
who wants to put
Yeah.
money in my company, and one of them's some guy who wants a job. And it's really, really hard to parse all that data. So why don't we like build some intelligence, analyze, scan who they are, enrich their content, and tag the ones for follow-up. And actually now I can do a thing where I say, you scan my card. I say, hey, send Jimmy. I did this with you on the phone. I said,
Totally did.
hey,
Yeah, yeah.
Jimmy, send Jimmy the deck and the safe note to invest in the company and an invite to the alpha to cut the queue. And boom, 10 minutes later, he got the link. And it blew his mind. It blows
I
anyone's
got
mind.
I got a whole email that I could not tell was AI, and I get AI crap all the time, right? It had the enriched I mean, I used it to prep for this meeting. I went back and found that and went through. I'm like, "Oh yeah, here we go." And you literally did that live from a voice prompt in 10 seconds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
We are
yeah, that's
shipping.
powerful.
So this week, and I'll be honest, right now, and look, we're in alpha and beta. We just moved to beta, and the thing we tell people is it will break at periods of time because we're tuning. So
Sure, of course.
homunculus, which is our newest element, we basically tore out the AI harness that was managing all the AIs and rebuilt it from the ground up. It's 10x faster. It's 10x smarter. But to this morning, it doesn't quite touch all the tools. Like, it doesn't
Sure,
know how
sure.
to like do certain things. So it'll ship later this week. And then as soon as it ships, we're going to turn on about another couple hundred invites and get people in the system. And, we are gunning for an app store midsummer and then a big fundraise in the fall. So, but we are fundraising. We are actively running it, the business. This is like the most exciting company I've had in a long time. It's also the first
Yeah.
company where I use our product. Like when our product's down, I'm like, give me back my product.
Yeah. Well, you gotta eat your own dog food, and
Yeah.
I think you've touched on my next question here a little bit, but, you're basically a startup. You literally are building things from scratch on
We are
purpose,
literally a
right?
startup. Yeah.
Yeah. So given your background and all your success to go from there to basically building something from nothing up, what have been your struggles? I mean, you've got so many resources, your idea stack, because I'm similar, right? Visionary 3000, right? My team has to like say, okay, wait, we have to implement some of these things, right? So I get where you're coming from.
So,
What is your struggle today as you launch?
well, it's a great question. So a quick high level answer. My career has sort of swung between two extremes. Like any good entrepreneur, I have ADHD, I have dyscalculia, like I have all these disabilities, but I have these superpowers too, right? And the same thing goes in my career arc. Like it's been an even balance of big jobs like being CEO of the Daily Mail, founding a company that became part of Razorfish, running digital platforms at the BBC and Samsung. And then over here, starting companies, more than half of which completely shit the bed. Like, let's just
Yeah. Yeah.
there were some that were spectacular bed shitters and there were some others that were kind of base hits, but Yeah, it's like, look, let's just
Yeah,
call a spade a spade. Like that's the game,
sure.
right? Entrepreneurs are made differently. We can't help ourselves. You see a problem and you obsess about it. Like I got up this morning at 5 a.m. because I was thinking about what we're working on. It's so this is a really nerdy thing, but it's kind of interesting. So I wrote a daily prompt for myself that like says, hey, tell me about my meetings, prep me for all the people. And I realized with a few tweaks to the prompt, I can make it a validation prompt that tests our harness so that engineers can use it because I can call I know what all the tools are. So I can call all the tools in my daily
Uh,
prompt. And so I woke up last night with that idea. This morning at 5 a.m., I got up and I spent an hour tuning my own prompt to be a validation prompt. Like that's not a thing a normal CEO does. I guarantee you, Satya at Microsoft did not do that. He has other obsessions, but like
sure,
that's what makes
sure.
entrepreneurs
Yeah,
different is
laser
we
focus. Yep.
laser focus on a thing that has massive impact from a small amount of effort from us. But to be honest, the hardest thing for Kimono, and there's three of them. The first one has been startup financing, particularly venture financing, is very targeted at 24 to 34-year-old white males. And
Mm,
that is a thing I've heard said before and laughed at until I, as a man over 50, went out to fundraise and found like, even though I've had all the success, it's very hard. People are very uninterested in meeting a 50 something year old entrepreneur, even with a killer product.
interesting.
The second thing so fundraising has been not impossible, but much harder than I expected. The second thing, and this one is new, right? So when I was doing the web businesses and streaming businesses and internet interactive television businesses, like all those things, I was riding a wave of surf. But it was very easy for me, given my history, to see where the wave was going. And so I'd always catch the curve. I could like cut up the face. I don't know if you surf, I'm a big surfer. So like AI in the last year, more than half the days I woke up after I did a little grinding on a project and I opened up like Substack or the news, I would see some piece of news that made me worry that some company had just destroyed my business while I was asleep the night before. It hasn't happened yet that they actually destroyed it, but there's been a lot of sloppy press releases. And this is the first time that an industry is moving so fast that I find myself exhausted just from reading the news. That has never happened to me before. And maybe
Yeah.
the first one or the second one are related, but I don't think so, though. I think we are in a period of rapid innovation and evolution that is amazing and exhausting, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the iteration just in the 2000s, 2010s was pretty
Yeah.
quick, right?
Yeah.
Cybersecurity, all the things that
Yeah.
people
Yeah. Yeah.
just, that's the next thing. AI though, that compression of cycles it is scary. And
Yeah.
I don't think you should fear everything, right? Like you have to filter it. I think there's a lot of good tools and ways to get ahead, but you're right. People can do so much more with so much less resources these days. It's almost unfair. It's like leveling the playing field in some areas. And you're right. Yeah, for the entrepreneur that's got the ideas and is working on executing that,
Right.
it can be kind of weird.
We a year ago, before OpenClaw or Chat, a Claude Coworker, any of those products existed, that was what we were targeting is that plus this context and context, right? And so we did a lot of work building a chatbot that did a whole bunch of things like check stock prices and book travel that is utterly meaningless now. Right. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's not our fault. We were correct in the vision. We just did not know some dude in his underpants was going to build OpenClaw in January. And I actually know him. He's a great guy and change the world. Right. Like he did a simpler version of what we were doing for himself and moved the needle in a massive way. And that rapid pace of sort of, he went from, no one knowing it to, changing the world of computing. One thing I
Yeah.
want to mention is
Yeah.
that because as your security background, I think it'd be interesting. So I have a co-founder and our head of AI who are my two key guys in the company. And Alec is the co-founder is 19, he's almost 20 years old now. And it's so funny to meet a young me, right? I see him that he is so smart. The guy, like, we have a conversation and a day later, a thing is manifested. And it's like, but
Yeah.
also he built a CRM at 15 for realtors, right? So he really
Wow.
understands, he's passionate about the space. He's been deep there. His name's Alec Kursick. And then Sutha Kamal, our head of AI, you know, he uses the computers, he uses agentic systems to build code at scale. And like, there are moments where, and on the security side, we spend a lot of time talking about this. Cause like, here's an example. If you send me an email with a malicious piece of code and try and trick our AI into accepting that as its purpose or instructions, there's a shit ton of vulnerabilities there, right? So we spend probably 20% of our compute and engineering time thinking about those risks and
Mm.
counteracting them because
Yeah.
it's a big deal. And it's, we're just starting sort of looking at this SOC 2 compliance. We're COSA 2 certified. Like, we're all big security guys, right? But
Oh, yeah.
it's an interesting puzzle is in the time of AI, so much innovation has outstripped the sort of safety harnesses of traditional business, but there's no putting this genie back in the bottle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think what is your message then to entrepreneurs that are experiencing some of the same things you are, right? Like we even see that in our own MSP. Like our industry is changing. The way to go to market, sales and marketing is completely different. Our customers want less, things like our average deal size in our industry is half what it was just a few years ago. Like there's this constant need to catch up, I feel like.
so
How do you handle that?
it was very so many questions in there. So the first one is the AI and the revenue per seat model
Mhm.
has drastically changed, right? But so has labor. We
Mhm.
at our peak were 6 people doing the work of 20, right? And that is like I still okay, so the Coca-Cola story I was going to tell you on that is a really funny one. So, I founded Razorfish, one of the biggest website builders in the world, right? And our minimum for our website, even when we were early a startup company, was like 20 to 50 grand, right? So I looked at Kimono's website that our former head of product had built like in a weekend, one weekend, and had not touched. And it still talked about the chatbot of the future. And like, it was all off brand. Like it was all wrong. And I was like, I'm going to just like try and fix this. So like I opened up Perplexity and Claude Code, and in 8 hours and about $200 of compute, I built the website that people can go see at kimono.inc. I built the whole thing. Like,
That's wild.
and just to be clear, I looked at the site at the end and I was like, I would have paid some guy in the Philippines 5 grand to do what I just did. And it would have been less good because this was me straight from my brain on the paper.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like how in a decade have we gone from a $20,000 to $50,000 piece of work to $200 of compute and a few hours of a technically facile founder with a clear vision and mission? Like that forcing function is not well distributed yet, but it is, it is the lever. There's the fulcrum that is going to move the world in really odd, some good, some bad ways. But like, I my co-founders all make, they're like, yeah, of course you could do this. But I was like, this is that the CEO of a company could just get a bug up his ass about a website and not hire a guy or a girl, not like I just did it in a weekend,
Yeah. I mean,
you
I
know?
think of my kids who are growing up in the age of AI. Like I grew up in the 90s, right? So it wasn't 70s, but it was, the IBM 286 and personal computers were the next thing. But that
Yeah.
took
You were
10, 15
pre-Windows.
plus years.
You were
Yeah.
pre-Windows. You were DOS, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're a little
Oh
behind
yeah.
me,
Heck
but you're
yeah.
right there
DOS
with me.
6.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've seen that. And I'm learning as fast as I can AI for our own business. But like my 15-year-old is making websites already. He has no idea what code is. He's just typing what he wants and refining it. And I'm like, this isn't fair. Also, he will be probably more successful than I will by himself just natively learning this stuff. When your brain is young. So I think there's definitely winners that are made, but yeah, you have to be willing to change and adapt. I mean, the farmer that feared the combine when he had two horses and a plow, was left behind. It's not that
Well,
the
so
combine was bad. It's just you gotta, get on board.
So my last like little anecdote about the Beach Boys, because I just love dropping them in. I
Oh
get
yeah, yeah.
emails from them
Please,
sometimes. They're like, "Why quit name dropping us?" I'm like, "No, it's so much fun.
I
Come on."
love it.
And actually, Bruce, one of the Beach Boys, he loves it. So when we did that record, so the reason we chose Pro Tools, which was alpha software at the time, was the Beach Boys' trick to making hits was they tape spliced the chorus, so it'd be the same chorus over and over and over. So it would like your ear
Sure.
loved the repetition, and it's like cool. That's actually a cool story. And so I was touring with them and they're like, "Hey, we want you to work in the studio." And then Keith and I talked and he was the engineer. And I quickly understood what they wanted me to do was razor blade edit. And I was like, I'm not doing that. It's
Yeah,
like, that's
yeah,
a lot of work. I'm lazy. So I was like, I just wanted to use the computer to do the editing, which is a very reasonable, minimum viable iterative experiment in a new technology. So I showed a couple of the Beach Boys this, and the momentum of this idea got way ahead of our skis. And before I know it, we're sitting in a restaurant at Il Fornaio in Palo Alto with a guy named Steve Jobs and a bunch of Apple executives. Because in order to use the the 12 or the 16 track version of Pro Tools, we have to have alpha hardware from Apple. And before we knew it,
Uh,
we were doing a thing we should definitely not have been doing, right? But we did it and we recorded the record. We mixed it down in Martha's Vineyard. We mastered it doing it digital. We plugged the digital cable from the system into the mastering system. No one in the world had ever done that before.
that's wild.
Theoretically, the specs said it would work, but we weren't sure. We were like, this
Yeah.
could not work. Like,
Yeah, you're pioneers. Oh
yeah.
yeah.
But the key thing is we finished all this. We put the record out. It wasn't a very good record, by the way. It was, it was decently recorded, but it had a lot of issues. But the recording engineer world pilloried us. They were like, this is going to destroy music, tape, and it was like all these things. And most of those people are not working anymore, right? Like that wave of change changed everything, and it changed it so fast. Like I challenge you to find a recording studio that doesn't have Pro Tools in it today. You won't find
Oh
it doesn't
yeah.
exist. Yeah.
Well, it's like Napster. They said the same thing about that, and now
Yeah.
there's Spotify and everything else. Yeah, to be an innovator and a deal maker, you gotta make waves,
Yeah.
or else nothing changes.
Absolutely.
I think that's a huge plus.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Titus, this has been really fascinating. I hope our listeners kind of get a glimpse of from your story and are motivated to go and chase those ideas that they have rattling around.
Yeah.
Because
And
if they
I'm
say
very
ideas, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm very accessible. If anyone wants to contact me, best way is either on Instagram at RxDXT. That's my handle in most places. On Twitter, bizarrely, it's at Richard Titus. Someone else has the other one, but at RxDXT or at Richard Titus is how you reach me personally. And Kimono is go.getkimono.com.
I will add all that to the show notes. Yeah, you beat me to the next question because yeah,
Yeah,
I will say for a fact he is legit. I he reached out through an email funnel from us, and Titus, you've been very down to earth and accessible the
thanks.
whole time. So I really appreciate that. I think people relate to that as well. I'm definitely going to be a user of Kimono. I think it's got huge potential. So yeah, if you like what you hear, check out the show notes. We'll link everything so that you guys can get a demo. And yeah, Titus, has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for being on today. Really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
man.
Take care.